we're back with finding the common multiples of two whole numbers, and we'll go into finding least common multiples today. So you should have already found the greatest common factors of a number and used the prime factorization chart to do that. So today we're going to use the prime factorization chart to find the least common multiple of a number. So in the past, what you've done is you've used the chart method or the list method of finding the common multiples in order to find the least common multiple of two numbers or more. So the first thing would be to find the first three by making a list. So you can see on number 16, I've done the common multiples by starting the list of the multiples of 10. So 10 times 1 is 10, 10 times 2 is 20, and 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, 90, 100. I've stopped there for now. Then for 8, I'm going to do 8 times 1 is 8, 8 times 2 is 16, and then 24, 32. If you get stuck on the 8s, you can always add 10 and subtract 2. Okay, the trick on this one is when you have a list of 10s, when you get to your other number, when you end up with a number that ends in 0, you know that that's going to be a common multiple of the 10. So here I have one that ends in a 0. So 40 is a common multiple. But that's only one common multiple, and I need to find the first 3. So in the past, you guys probably would continue making a list until you came to the first 3. Okay? So you could keep doing that. It would take a little bit of time, but you could find them. The method number 2 would be to do that same strategy. So find the 40, which is the first common multiple. And then using that first common multiple, you're just going to multiply it times 2 to find the second common multiple. And then times 3 to find the third common multiple. So the second should be 80. And then the third should be 120. And then you can see where when you make your list, what sometimes happens is you make a mistake, like what happened here. Instead of adding 8 or going up to the next one, this should have been 80 right there, which that would have been your second common multiple, which would match right here, because 72 plus 8, or that 10th multiple, would have been 80. So the first 3 common multiples of 8 and 10 are 40, 80, and 120. Okay, so it's a little bit easier than making your whole list to find the first 3 common, of finding the first one and then multiplying by 2 to get the second, multiplying 40 times 3 to get the third one. If you needed the fourth, multiply it times 4 to get the fourth one, and so on. We're going to take it to method 3, which is a little bit simpler than that. Okay? So if I told you there was a method 3 using prime factorization without making those long lists of multiples, you would be happy, hopefully. So we're going to use method 3, which is using a prime factorization chart. Again, you can just cover this up and do 8 divided by the prime number of 2, and that would be 4. 10 can also be divided by 2, and that would be 5. So then I keep going. Can 4 and 5 both be divided by the same prime number? And the answer is no. So I know I need to stop. Okay? If I were finding the greatest common factor, this is where I taught you to draw the F. So I'll do it with a different color. So if on this problem it said to find the greatest common factor and the least common multiple, you could do that. So the greatest common factor of 8 and 10 would be 2. But we're not doing that. We're finding the least common multiple. So you might have noticed in yellow here this big mark that looks like an L. So highlight the L in your least common multiple. Okay? What this means is you're going to multiply everything that you've pulled out on the side, like you would for the greatest common factor, but then everything that's on the bottom too. And you notice nothing's on the bottom here, but there is something here. So wherever I stopped, that's technically your bottom. So my L is going to be a short stubby L, and it will be, my least common multiple would be the product of 2 times 4 times 5. So 8 times 5 is 40. So the least common multiple of 8 and 10 is 40, which is exactly what we found on the other side. Okay, let's look at this one, number 21, 4 and 9. So here I have this, and they're not both even. I can't divide them by 3. I can't divide them both by 4. They don't divide by 5. I'm past the 4, so that means I have to stop. So if I have to stop, just like when we did the greatest common factor, that's like dividing them both by 1. So I'm not going to multiply them by anything. So then I need to make my L and come to the bottom. And that means I multiply what technically is like a 1 there times the 4 times the 9. So 1 times 4 times 9. So 4 times 9 is equal to 36. So the least common multiple of 4 and 9 is 36. Sometimes that will happen where you can't factor any prime numbers out. So the least common multiple is actually a product of the two numbers that you're trying to find the least common multiple of. The greatest common factor of these two numbers, if you were trying to find that, I would stop right there. The greatest common factor would be a product of anything on this left side, which would just be 1, because I have that. Okay, I'm going to give you my problem. So not a problem out of the book. We're going to do my problem. Okay, so if I gave you 48 and 96, bigger numbers, not so simple, but they're both even, so that we know that if I have my list of prime numbers here, just a few starting ones. That doesn't mean you can't go higher. You should if you can, if you need to. So 48 and 96 both divide by 2. So 48 divided by 2 is 24. 96 divided by 2 is 48. You can do it on your calculator if you needed to. Both of these are even. They both divide by 2. Keep going. So you should have found that was 12 and 24. I can divide by 2 again. I get 6 and 12. I can divide by 2 again. And I get 3 and 6. And then I divide by 3. I get 1 and 2. So to find the least common multiple, remember you're multiplying to make the L. So the least common multiple would be 2 times 2 times 2 times 2 times 3 times the 1 times the 2. If you do that on your calculator, you should get 96. If you want to challenge yourself, find the greatest common factor. You should stop right at the bottom of those. So essentially what you should be able to see is the greatest common factor would be 96 divided by whatever the product is of these two numbers. So 1 times 2 is 2. So 96 divided by 2 is 48. Or you could take 2 times 2 times 2 times 2 times 3. You should also get 48. Okay. There is one trick. What if I added a third number to this? Okay. A lot of you are going to try and put the third number in this chart right here. So you might say, well, if I had, let's say 14 in with this chart here. 14 can be divided by 2 and I get 7. But then I would have to stop right there. And I'd only be able to multiply 2 times 24 times 48 times 7 to find my least common multiple. However, sometimes that will work, but sometimes it won't. What you need to remember to do is if you have a third number like the 14, you need to take your least common multiple from here and add it into another chart. So if you have 3 numbers, you want to find the greatest common factor and the least common multiple of the first 2 numbers, and then put it in a second chart with the third. So just like we did with these 2 numbers, we're going to take the least common multiple and the greatest common factor, and whatever they want us to find of the third one, we're going to put it in a chart with the third. So if they want to find the least, they want us to find the least common multiple of all 3 of those numbers, we're going to take the 14, which would have been the third number, and put it into a new chart with the least common multiple of those 2 numbers. So 48 and 96, the least common multiple was 96. So then I take out the 2. So then I have my least common multiple again that I would multiply. And I would find that the least common multiple of 48, 96, and 14 is 2 times 7, which is 14, times 48, which is 672. And that is finding least common multiples. You'll most often have just 2 numbers, but if you are adding in a third number, you're trying to find the least common multiple of 3 numbers, make sure you find the least common multiple of the 2 first, and then take that third number into a new chart with whatever you found the least common multiple was of the first 2 numbers. That way you can be